Hi, and welcome to the Personal Podcast, where we get to meet the real person behind the professional. I am really excited to welcome Michaela Reaney today, who is co-founder of Opportunity Global. So, Michaela, have you ever had an out-of-body experience?
I have, Charlotte, and I don't think I really realised it was such an out-of-body experience until you asked me this question. So when I was 23, I'd had about a year of not feeling very well, and I'd gone through various different tests and lots of different things, and doctors just kept telling me that, you know, I was ill, I was stressed, all this kind of thing. And I knew in myself something wasn't quite right. And it kind of came to a head, and I ended up being rushed into hospital. And what I'm getting to in terms of the out-of-body experience was actually I had heart surgery, which was quite challenging in itself. But the bit that was such an out-of-body experience was after coming round from the surgery, unfortunately, they hadn't realised at the time, but they'd actually caused an aneurysm and they'd ruptured an artery. So although they were fixing something, they'd caused another problem, obviously by mistake. So what happened was I was in this hospital room. I'd come out of the recovery bit, and the next thing I knew, there was literally I felt like almost like I'd wet myself, but it was actually blood pouring out. I know, it's a bit gross. And these consultants and nurses all had to like pin me down and hold down like to try and stop the blood flow. And the reason it felt like such an out-of-body experience was it was like I'm describing it to you now, but watching it from above. That's the only way I have any memory or recollection of it happening. And I remember thinking, someone keeps screaming. Gosh, like that's not helping the situation. So whoever's screaming needs to stop. And it was me that was obviously screaming. And it was like I was just watching it all from above. So I can remember the pain of them physically like pressing down on me, because it was a couple of hours that they had to press on me, and they had these kind of suction things, I don't know quite what they were, that I had to use to stem the blood flow while I was having blood transfusions at the same time to try and bring back some blood flow. And it was just the most surreal moment of my entire life. And when I think about it now, you don't realise how much these kind of traumas stay in your body. So although you suppress it, and, you know, from a mental health perspective, I don't really think about it. But now I'm describing it to you, I can feel my body like reacting to that situation and that kind of panic and that fear. And it was just unbelievable. A really, really strange experience.
I mean, it blows my mind. Like, firstly, I feel a little bit queasy from all of the
Sorry,
blood.
Yeah, no, it's pretty gross.
No, it's fine, and it's not gross, really. You know, it's our bodies.
Yeah,
and
true. Yeah.
So where was the blood coming from?
So they'd basically ruptured an artery in my like groin area. So it was coming from there. So I've got quite bad scars from it, because I then had to go in and have vascular surgery to try and correct it. And the most awful part of the whole thing was the bruising afterwards. Like, I was literally black and blue. I couldn't walk, really, because the pain was so bad, because they were literally pressing down on me for hours to try and stem the blood flow.
Crazy. When you say they, like, how many people?
So I know for the whole time there was the two, like one surgeon and one consultant who'd kind of rushed in to see what was happening. They actually stayed and literally were swapping between them two and another person to keep pressure on me the whole time. And then they had these suction things that they were using. I don't really know what they are, but they were to try and kind of keep. So I had to then have those on for 24 hours afterwards. So the bruising was just unbelievable. Like, that was the worst part. But I remember kind of I suppose like a bit dark humour, but the funniest part was the next day, like the room that I was in, it was just like a crime scene. There was blood everywhere. So then they had to like take the curtains down, replace the curtains, like literally it was just like...
So was it literally spraying?
Yeah.
Could you see it physically spraying out your leg?
So like out of my groin area.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, that must have been so scary.
It was really scary. And I was literally sat in like a pool of my own blood. Like, that's how I was lying in bed, and they'd taken me, you know, when you come out of the recovery section, I don't know if you've ever had surgery, but when you come out of there and into like a normal ward area, that's where I was. So they thought everything had gone quite well, and I was just there to kind of start recuperating. And I remember lying there thinking something doesn't feel right. It was literally like this feeling like I'd wet myself.
Yeah.
And I thought I had, to be honest with you. And then I looked and there was just blood everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's when it started getting worse. Yeah.
Mine was like nothing compared to you, but I lost about 2 litres of blood after childbirth.
Oh, gosh.
And I remember that feeling as well, just warm, wet. And I thought I'd wet myself. But oh my goodness.
It's a weird feeling, isn't it?
Yeah. How much blood did you actually lose?
I don't know now. Like, I mean, I had 4 blood transfusions.
Wow.
So if that
a lot.
gives quite a lot. And it made me anemic. So for quite a long time afterwards, not only was I trying to get, obviously, my health back on track, I then had, I was then anemic as well. So I had kind of iron tablets to take, which isn't a big deal at all. But when you're already feeling quite weak and vulnerable and not great anyway, that on top of it. And then you're balancing the new medication you have to take for my heart condition. So it was kind of a really challenging time, really.
A lot going on.
Yeah. And I wasn't here. I had to go to Manchester for it all. So the type of surgery I needed, they couldn't actually do locally or even at the Freeman in Newcastle. So having to be in Manchester as well and like away from, home comforts and my poor mum staying in a hotel, around the corner to, be able to check in on me. It was just very like disruptive time of my life.
Yeah, definitely disruptive. And that out of body experience, I've read a lot of books because I'm a bit weird like that.
I remember you saying,
near death experiences and stuff, and they always describe that kind of floating above the body on the ceiling, and then hearing things that were coming from you, but disassociation from that.
Completely disassociation. And I think it's your body's own way of dealing with the trauma that you're going through, that you're actually, disassociating from that experience so that, I don't know, maybe it's your body's way of coping, I guess.
It's interesting though, and I like to think of it a little deeper, almost like your soul's almost coming out a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, I don't know. I think the best thing I can describe is just I was watching it from above. Like even when I think of the guys who were having to like pin me down, like almost like pin me down and press on where the blood was flowing from. It was like I was watching them from above as well, whereas actually, obviously, in reality, they would have been like literally right in front of me. Yeah. But I can't visualize that at all. It's just I was above it and this screaming that I can remember. Yeah.
Yeah, crazy. There's actually been studies done on it because it's happened so many times, the out-of-body experience or near-death experience, that the hospitals in some, not every hospital, but for this study, they'd place things in the corner of the room that you could only see if you floated up to the ceiling. And they would be able to identify key areas. Or there was one instance where I think they identified a tattoo on someone's back of their neck that they
the person just wouldn't have been able to see.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that maybe they glanced at it, but again, it was just... And again, I'd never heard anyone's story of it in person like your story that backs everything up. So
yeah, I never really thought of it as like a near-death experience until like a long time after. I think at the time you're so focused on feeling better, feeling less vulnerable, feeling more, you're so just focused on that moment of feeling better again. And even like waking up from heart surgery, it felt like the first time I could actually properly breathe in my life, because I'd been born with this condition, but I just never knew. So at the kind of age of 23, I took this huge big breath and I was like, is this how I'm meant to have felt this whole time? And it was just amazing because it felt like my chest was really clear. I could take this deep breath. So it was almost worse in a way that I then had to go through that trauma, because actually the first initial part felt amazing.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. And we glossed over that, but you had heart surgery. That in itself is a real big deal and gone unnoticed for so long.
I know. And so that was, I think once I had that was the kind of major surgery I'd had. I'd had one prior to that, just a couple of months before. But unfortunately, what they needed to do, they couldn't then do in the way that they wanted to. So I had to go back. But so it went on for quite a while. And I think the hardest thing sometimes when you go through things like that, I could deal with it. It was watching the impact it had on people around me, and like my mum and the panic of, her feet, and also her feeling a bit of guilt as well. I think that, should she have, should this have been picked up as a child? Should this have been something that had been dealt with then, So I think it's all of that part then is, it's something that you don't fully process at the time. And I think it's only now that I'm obviously quite a bit older that I've really thought about what that kind of that feeling, that trauma does to your actual body, and how you start to overcome it actually by facing it rather than just pushing it down and thinking that's something I've just dealt with, it's in my past now, we move on.
And so is that something you've started to do now to address the trauma of it?
Yeah, I think so. I would say the last couple of years, I've invested a lot of time and energy into like my own healing, not just from that experience, but generally things in my life. And I think through that process, you have to face the parts of yourself that you maybe don't like that much, or situations or mistakes that you've made. And by having therapy and then also working with a coach, I really feel like I've really started to do that. I think when I first started, I thought it would be this thing that you do and then you're healed and everything's amazing.
Yeah.
And actually what I've really uncovered in the last year in particular is that it's a constant journey. So you uncover something that you have maybe like a fear or an inner critic that's been holding you back. And then it's when you start kind of peeling off all the different layers, then there's something else, and you think, gosh, have I still not learnt this lesson?
Oh, yes, I can relate to that for sure.
So I think it's an ever-going journey, but it's one that I'm really committed to, because I do believe if all of us in the world had the opportunity to really focus on these parts of ourselves and really heal the things that have happened to us in our lives, I do believe a lot of the issues we have in the world would be better. And I do think there's a big job of the workplace to be part of that healing journey, because one thing that typically unites most people is that we have a workplace. So there's things that need to be done there that can help that process for people.
Yeah, you're so right. Like, our bodies are so clever, intuitive in every way, but at the same time, you'd have thought they'd have a better way of dealing with the trauma and letting it out. Or maybe that's how we're conditioned, the sociological aspect of life that bottles it up.
Yeah.
And, you can't talk about that. You've got to move on. You've got to have that very British attitude. And
Totally. Yeah. And I think that's what then it becomes a much bigger issue later down the line.
Totally.
Or it shows up in ways that you didn't even realise. Because the thing is never the thing.
Yes.
So the thing that triggers you or stresses you out or something, or, that really pisses you off at home if something isn't done or whatever, that's never actually the thing that you're annoyed about. There's always something else going on, isn't there, typically, that's kind of pushed you to feel stressed or overwhelmed. So, yeah, I think that investment in time in healing, like, it's hard work, right? You start unpeeling stuff, and then you've got to face your fears. You've got to face the things that are not so great about yourself, the mistakes you've made, the things that you need to kind of forgive yourself for. But I think by having that time spent looking at forgiveness, looking at acceptance of situations, that's what actually helps us lead a better life.
You're so right. And it's painful to do.
Yeah.
You've got to kind of do that
really
and be willing
painful.
To do it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's incredibly difficult to do as well when you're perhaps trying to do it alone. And, I read so many books now on these kind of things, and, podcasts are out there which are brilliant. So there's all these tools that are now available that are either free or quite cost effective. So I think the joy is now information and learning is available a lot more than it used to be. Before, I think it was quite a exclusive thing to be able to kind of access therapy or any kind of learning around that sort of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And it's good to talk about it as well and make people feel like it's normal to be feeling this, but then it's, yes, you need to take action as well.
And I think it's just simple things like, I've really made a conscious effort just in the last year that when someone asks me how I am, I don't just say fine or okay or things are okay or things are good. I go into a bit more detail, and I might not necessarily in that situation feel safe enough to give every warts and all, but I think by opening up and saying, actually, things aren't that great right now, for whatever reason that might be, I'm amazed every time I do that, how much that creates a space for that other person to open up as well. And I didn't realise how those simple things could be really powerful. And I've had way more interesting conversations with people, way more honest conversations with people. And I think that sometimes it's not the big things, it's those little moments that actually we can all feel a little bit less alone.
I totally agree. And that's kind of one of the reasoning behind this podcast as well. And equally, I can't expect such honest answers from my guests if I don't open up a bit on the podcast as well.
Makes sense.
So, yeah, no, it's lovely that you say that. And obviously, it was a massive thing in your life. Has it made you live life differently?
I think it has in some respects. So I think at the age I was, I think it made me reduce my partying a little bit. And I think it scared me, quite honestly, to just rethink maybe how I kind of treat my body. And I think sometimes, or certainly for me, I didn't always respect my body maybe as much as I should have. I think as I've got older, it's changed the way I live my life even more so, though, because I think still at like 23, I was kind of, you do have a bit of feeling of invincibility.
Yes, yeah.
And kind of cockiness. I think it scared me how vulnerable I felt in that situation, and the things that I maybe took for granted that I could just always do, like walking up the stairs, was really difficult for a period of time, and adjusting to medication and accepting that I have to take medication for the rest of my life, particularly when I'm someone that hates even taking a paracetamol. So for me, that was like a big thing. So it was more the adjustments, I think, that I had to make to my life, but it definitely made me just, particularly as I've got older, I think it's completely made me rethink like how I want to feel, and also how I want to make sure that I do have longevity in my life as well. I think that's the bit that's been most different, and I probably didn't fully respect that till I was mid-30s.
Yeah, I can relate to all of that. They do say youth is wasted on the young, don't they? So true. And you mentioned taking things for granted. What are you most grateful for now in your life?
Ooh, I think the big thing I'm grateful for is really meaningful connections with people and relationships.
Yeah.
I think before I used to think the gratitude stuff was like the big stuff, the big successes, the big goals being hit, whatever that might be. But I think for me now, it's as simple as having those, really good, meaningful relationships with people and having good connections, whether that's in business, in personal life, whatever that looks like. I think that for me is the bit I'm most grateful for.
Oh, that's a really good answer. It's often overlooked as well.
I know. I think I'm a people person anyway, but for me, I just love learning other people's stories, building a connection with people. I do believe that if you look hard enough and you work hard enough at it, you can build a connection with anyone. And it's those meaningful ones and those great conversations that I get really excited about.
Oh, absolutely. I think a lot of people learnt that lesson in the pandemic as well, when that was removed from them.
Very true. Yeah, totally.
Brilliant. And we've talked about longevity, and something I can relate to since having children. It really made me focus on that, especially being an older parent. But also it's important to have a good life, as we call it. But often we don't define what that good life means.
What does it mean?
What does that mean for you?
Definitely the relationships bit, I think, is part of it. But I think it's also finding ways to live my values. That feels like a good life to me, because if you live your values, anything that you're doing or the relationships you're building or the actions you're taking, they should naturally feel better because they're aligned. Now, don't get me wrong, like there'll be things in life that we have to do sometimes that you think, well, is that even anything to do with my values, unloading the dishwasher or whatever. But I think a good life is about really enjoying those everyday moments and not getting so hung up about the future, maybe as well, like being more present, being more attuned to what's going on around me and actually enjoying the moment rather than thinking, okay, but what's next? Or, oh, but I need to do this. And just taking those, taking rest more seriously, all of those things I think are interconnected, and that feels good to me.
Definitely. And what are your values you mentioned there?
A big one for me is freedom. So, and I mean freedom in terms of like the constraints of, I guess, of like For example, I don't work well in an office because I'm quite disruptive.
I'll join the club.
So I think freedom to have flexibility, freedom to, travel, enjoy myself, that for me, working towards financial freedom and freedom for my family is really important to me. And I didn't really understand the link to healing and dealing with past trauma, and actually how that is incredibly freeing for me personally. I only learned that literally a few months ago. Like, I know that sounds maybe really obvious to other people.
I think I need to learn that, actually.
But I'd never connected how deeply, freedom was a value for me. And so it's through going through this, therapy and the hard work to do it, actually, I'm starting to feel more free than I had before.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I've been doing a bit of soul searching lately, thinking of the new vision values for the company, and definitely freedom came up. All those financial freedom, freedom to travel, that sort of thing, but creative freedom as well for me.
Yeah, it's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah, so freedom, it's such an important word and value. Did the heart surgery make you question the meaning of life altogether?
I think it definitely made me question my own mortality and really face that more. I think it made me realise that the things that I used to get bothered about, like the small things, they're just so irrelevant now. And I think when you go through something like that and you face, not being here anymore and not having the experiences that you want in life, I think it really makes you face the things that you do really want to do and actually take action on those things rather than them just being a dream or a goal or an ambition. Actually, what am I going to do about it, right? Because no one is coming. No one's coming to save you. You are here. You are here right now. And what are you going to do with this precious, precious life that you're given? And I think it's made me think about, what do I want it sounds a bit grand, but what do I want my legacy to be? What am I actually here for? What am I trying to do differently? So in the small window of the universe that I'm actually here on this earth, I do want to speak up about the things that are important to me. I do want to not be afraid of, my inner critic or being judged by others. As a recovering people pleaser, that's a tough one.
Yeah, oh bless you.
But it's trying to, slowly but surely put those things to one side so that you can do the things that you're here to do, and you can do them in a way that feels really good to you, but also can have an impact. And I think the meaning of life for me now is having an impact and having a really bloody good time while I'm here.
That's beautiful. And everything you've said there has so much meaning to me as well. And, are you doing that? Are you embodying everything you're setting out to do?
Not every day, Charlotte. I wish. No, I think slowly but surely, yes. I think, no week, no day, no month is ever exactly as you want it to be, right? But I think what I'm really focusing on is trying to be more present for that kind of process. That for me looks like doing meditation, and I never, if you'd have said to me even maybe 10 years ago, you'd be so into meditation, I would have just laughed. I wouldn't have thought that would be me at all. Having to sit still and kind of be with your own thoughts, practicing things like now where, I'd go meditate, but I'd take everything I own with me, so many different distractions, because that's just what I'm like. So now I'm even making myself just sit quietly on my own for 5 minutes. Just no meditation, no nothing. Just sit with your own thoughts. Find it really, really difficult.
Oh, yeah, I would as well.
But doing things like that, being more present, I think is the biggest thing. I wish someone had told me that years ago. I didn't understand the power of it. But it's that makes me feel like I am living a better life because I'm less stressed. Even when really difficult things, the last year has been probably my hardest in business. But by focusing so much on my mindset, my well-being, I'm able to handle those challenges way better than I would have even 2-3 years ago. So I think it's making me a better person by being present and for actually facing those parts of me that I don't like and doing something about it.
Yeah, I'm going to take that on board because I need to be better at sitting down with my own thoughts or meditating. Do you, when you sit down, say for 5 minutes, no distraction, do you have a topic that you're going to work on in your own mind, or do you just let it flow?
Just let it be. I think, again, like a little bit of that freedom bit. I think before I used to be like more like almost like regimented with my journaling or my meditation or whatever. Now I just let myself sit, and whatever comes up is what comes up that day. And so sometimes that's hard because, you know, if you go through grief or other things, sometimes those things have a way of creeping up on you when you least expect it. So it's being quite, quite emotional at times. And it sounds so simple, but it's really changed things for me because it's made me just be more focused on actually like and intentional. I think that's the thing. It's made me more focused, more intentional with my time. And that then frees me up to do all of the other things that I want to achieve as well.
Brilliant. That sounds possible for me as well. I struggle with the meditation. I want to get better at that. But if I just said to myself 5 minutes, just sit alone with your thoughts, because then it's the stopping the thoughts coming through my mind that I struggle with. There's so many all at once, all on different tangents. So I can just sit for 5 minutes and listen. I'm going to start doing that. I'll let you know how I get on.
And let yourself process it as well, rather than just moving on. So whatever comes up, sometimes you might have to sit longer with it because actually whatever's come up is maybe a bit challenging or whatever it might be, but actually just let yourself feel the feelings. I think that's where stress has come for me way more in life, is when I bottle it all up, you know, a little bit like you said, like you just that kind of like, get on with it, face it another day. And, you know, that's what then becomes quite overwhelming because I believe that creates a lot of like dysregulation in your body. So those minutes of, you know, where you could have just faced it and experienced some discomfort, but maybe not as bad as it then becomes because you've bottled it all up.
Yes, no, I totally suffered from that. Just the last podcast guest, actually, we talked about that exact same thing. Mainly through the miscarriages and stuff. I just right, back to work, can't dwell on that, just got to get on with things. But then actually, it was a counsellor that said to me, you haven't allowed your body to feel those feelings. So it's made it so much worse for you because it needs to escape. You need to let it out. So really interesting. Things I'm learning through mistakes.
I know, gosh.
Usually the best way to learn, but the most painful way to learn. Talking about that, if there's one thing you could change in your life currently, what would it be?
In my life currently or generally?
Either.
I think one thing that would change in my life is learning way earlier to put down the things that were not mine to carry.
Okay.
So what I mean by that is I think sometimes in life we take these things on with us, whether it's like conditioning from society or, you know, trauma from our childhood, whatever it might be. We carry that along with us in our whole lives. And I think sometimes we don't realise that what we've kind of taken on in this backpack with us was not ever ours to carry. That was someone else's mistakes or that was someone else's problem, but we've made it ours because we felt it was some sort of reflection on us as a person, or, you know, the lack of love or lack of whatever that situation might be. So I don't think I realised until, again, you know, probably last kind of 5 years, that actually there was things in my life that I was taking along with me that were never mine to carry anyway.
Wow.
And so actually, if I'd have learnt that before, maybe that would have made me, you know, feel differently about myself, my life, or things, how I think I would have handled situations differently.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's such a powerful analogy, the almost emotional backpack.
I don't know where that came from.
You're loading up. No, it's really good. I definitely have topped up my backpack with problems that weren't my own without realising.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting. And do you want to go into any of those problems that weren't your own? Or
I think one of them particularly that stands out for me is that, you know, I chose not to have a relationship anymore with my biological father.
Right.
And, you know, I think I put up with so much, you know, dangerous, quite traumatizing behavior at times that I was taking that on along with me in my life. And actually, when I decided to stop communication and any interaction, it was the first time probably in my life that I actually chose myself without having that holding on to that kind of fear or guilt or shame. And it felt like I'd put down those things that I was maybe carrying with me that weren't mine in the first place. So I think that's where it comes from. It's kind of making that decision, which is a hard one, to choose yourself rather than maybe putting up with things that you, because someone is, related to you, you feel that you have to.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And we talked about kind of the mental side. Like, how have you looked after your health since the operation, kind of physically?
So I think there's different things. So I think one of the big things is, just exercising and making sure that, I'm mindful of kind of the impact of things that I'm, eating, drinking, all of those kinds of things. But one of the biggest things for me that's really helped actually is wearing an Aura ring.
Oh,
so
yes.
my Aura ring can measure my heart rate. It tracks sleep, steps, all the usual stuff as well. And it's really helped me just get more in tune with the impact of different things as well. So the impact of exercise, the impact of better sleep. It's making me more conscious of my general heart health, especially as we get older, right? Whether you've got a heart that's damaged, I suppose, or not working quite as well as it should, or a perfectly healthy heart. As we get older, there's an impact, right?
Absolutely.
So it's made me more, I think, mindful and conscious of those things as well.
Wow, because I used to have a Fitbit, it broke, and actually I've noticed that I feel a bit out of touch with my body.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, there's part of me that thinks maybe it's not healthy to have Bluetooth running around my body all the time anyway. But yeah, so the ring aspect, how does that work then?
So it's an electronic ring. It's really good. You wear it, they recommend it being on this finger, but I swap between the two because sometimes it feels a bit weird constantly wearing it. But it literally tracks everything. And what I really noticed was the impact of things like alcohol, both on my sleep, but also on my heart rate as well. And it really made me conscious of my relationship with alcohol and what that impact was having on my heart and my general health.
So do you really kind of monitor your alcohol consumption?
So I haven't been drinking at all this year. So I can't quite remember the date. It was early February the last time I had alcohol. And I've made that decision for a number of things. I think the big thing that happened that made me realise that alcohol, perhaps wasn't something I wanted in my life anymore was my best friend died 3 years ago, actually today. And
sorry, bad timing for the episode.
Okay. And he was an alcoholic, and it killed him. He didn't see his 35th birthday, and he was told time and time again by doctors that he wasn't going to hit his 35th birthday if he didn't stop. But that disease took over his entire life, and it completely changed his personality, everything. And I think having kind of witnessed that and gone through the grieving process of that and still grieving, it's really just completely changed my viewpoint of alcohol and how damaging it is to people. And I think the scariest thing is how much it can take hold of someone's life as well. And I've had a couple of other experiences of, friends and family that have gone through addiction as well. And I think it just really made me rethink my whole relationship with alcohol. And so I would say I've been sober curious for a couple of years now, and I've had stints of, not drinking at all. This time feels different. This feels like this might be me never drinking again. And I think the big thing that I noticed was just sometimes I didn't like myself when I was drinking alcohol.
Yeah, me too.
And I didn't like my behaviour, or there were certain things I might have said when I was drinking, and all these different things. And I just thought, why am I doing this? Ultimately, it is a poison. It's a very well-marketed poison. I mean, well done to the drinks brands. They've done a cracking job of that. And I just feel like it's probably not something I need in my life anymore. And with this year being such a challenge, I think it also, alcohol was never going to make that challenge any easier. So, it feels like a good conscious decision to just look after myself a bit more, but also something that I was never dependent on, but I didn't like my relationship with alcohol, and I didn't like who it who I was sometimes when I was drinking.
Oh yeah, I've been there as well, and I'm sober curious. I hadn't heard that before, but I'm definitely sober curious. And
Yeah.
I stopped drinking. Well, since having children, I've hardly drank. I'm still kind of breastfeeding as well.
You don't have time either, right?
No, and you can't risk a hangover. Yeah, you just need to be productive constantly. But yeah, I used to drink far too much on weekends, and then my head would still be fuzzy on a Monday morning, sometimes Tuesday morning, depending how much I drank. And it was seen as cool and fitting in, especially in the working culture as well.
Totally.
And
it's everywhere, right?
Yeah, I think we talked about this before, but maybe it's society's way of controlling us a little bit, making us work towards the alcohol, that drink, and then we feel so useless. We can't really do that much.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I do think there's a reason that, if you think of even just in the Northeast, like, or when the kind of shipyards were full and busy and operational, right outside the entrance of each shipyard is a pub, right? So there's a reason for that you're coming out of work, you've been given your weekly wages, and you're going then straight into a pub. So I do think there's an element that alcohol does bring control across society. And I think when you start being either sober curious or deciding not to drink at all, I've definitely become so aware of how it's everywhere. So like every TV program, every film, there's people drinking alcohol. There's you use it for celebration, you use it for when you're not feeling great as well. It's you go into a shop and it's everywhere, and it's typically the thing that has the most kind of offers on it to buy and all of those other things. So I do think if you do have a not great relationship with alcohol or addicted, it must be incredibly difficult because you're literally surrounded by it.
You're so right. And you're seen as really weird if you don't drink.
Oh, gosh. The questions I get, Charlotte, is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And the comments as well. Like, comments from people, like even some of my closest friends making comments about me not drinking, things like, oh, well, do you think you might be being fun again by the time this event comes up, or whatever it might be. And I'm like, I'm actually quite good fun regardless.
Clearly not.
I know. You just obviously can't. It's not, no one else can see it, unfortunately. But I do think people think it's okay to comment on, and yet they don't, I know close friends obviously would know, but some people, they don't know whether I've got a real issue with alcohol or other things. And so I do think it's strange how people think it's okay to ask questions.
Yeah.
I also do get quite a lot of the like, oh, are you pregnant? That
I
comes
got that
up
a
quite
lot. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I don't think those same questions happen if there's something else you've decided not to do for your health.
That's true. Yeah, I do think it'll be like smoking. Maybe it's getting there where in 5-10 years time people are like, oh, why would you drink, sort of thing. It's flip it on its head.
I think maybe, because I do, a lot of people tell me who have like teenage children and stuff that actually it's just not really seen as the thing anymore. Whereas when I was a teenager and growing up, like there was a massive drinking culture and a going out culture, whereas I don't think it's the same anymore. I think a lot of them are looking after themselves.
I think that's lovely. Apparently it's more around coffee and stuff, which is great. Coffee culture, going out to coffee cafes and things like that. Coffee cafes, obviously. There's a new thing. Sorry to interrupt, but just a quick word about our sponsor, Be Daily. I've been subscribing to the Be Daily now since starting my business. It provides relevant and informative information directly to my inbox, not just about the Northeast, but also national news. If you're interested in subscribing, we'll put the link in the description box so you can get the business news directly to your inbox. Now back to the podcast.
And I think there's also like a lot of like going to the gym and, I think there's been really good things of social media where people are maybe a bit more thoughtful about, they've got access to more learning around looking after yourself and
that's
fitness
interesting.
And well-being and that kind of thing.
Because I suppose at my height of drunkenness, social media hadn't really taken off. And if I'd seen that reflected, I would not have liked that. So I'm very lucky in that respect. So maybe if I'd seen that early on, I'd be going to these coffee cafes.
Yes, I think so. Yeah.
Brilliant. Changing the subject a little bit. So you are bringing TEDx Teesside Women to Middlesbrough, which I think is fantastic. I've got my ticket. I just wondered, why are these events so important for this area?
Yeah. So I was born and grew up in Middlesbrough, and I think one of the big things that stuck out for me was Plan UK brought out that research. It was a couple of years ago, and they keep coming back to it kind of every couple of years, that Middlesbrough is the worst place to be born a girl in the UK. And to be honest, that narrative just really pisses me off, because these labels don't help anything. And I think sometimes in Teesside we have this kind of deprivation of aspiration because of these, these research that comes out or these messages that are given. So I don't think it ever really feels like we have a way of then overcoming that. So it's partly because of that. So I still feel that there is space in the kind of event world for us to have opportunities to celebrate some of the great things that are going on in the area, but also to learn from other people and from other places as well. So for me, that's the joy of TED. It brings together not just the business community, but it's very intersectional. And I think it is a way for us to all look at, actually from a system level, what can we all do to actually better support women and girls in this area, and what's going on elsewhere that we can learn from. So the speakers there will be a mix of local, people from further away as well, that are doing great things that we can all learn and perhaps bring back to Teesside. Also, Plan UK have also said that Hartlepool's one of the worst places to be born a girl as well. So to have two towns in our region, which is a pretty small area, is really frightening. So I think the more that we can all do to actually talk about these things and look at the challenges and take action. I'm not expecting us all to take big, huge, life-changing action necessarily from the event, but those small incremental changes, I do believe if you've got a voice and a platform, you should use it to have a positive impact. So that's the aim with TED. The other part of it is just, we never get the good events up here, Charlotte, right? We have to travel. We've got to go to, Newcastle's the next nearest TED. If there's other events, typically it's to one of the major cities. We don't have them all happening in Teesside. And I think that's an issue twofold, really. The cost of that and the time, right, to travel to these places. It's not the most accessible. And I think then it excludes a lot of people from the conversation because they can't otherwise afford to go to these things.
Yeah, I agree. And you're so right, that deprivation of aspiration. People always think it's the money.
Yeah.
But it's actually, you're totally right. We need more aspiring people leading the way for these girls.
Yeah.
And boys as well. But
absolutely. And the event, it's open to everyone. It's not that we're just expecting women to attend. The speakers are not just women. We've got non-binary people, men, everyone's represented because we can't do it alone, right? Together, we need to be able to have an impact. It's too big a problem to do, on our own. And I think that's where the conversations will be focused on challenges and issues that are facing women and girls right now. Mm-hmm. But the people to fix it is everyone.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And you're quite focused on diversity as well. Why is that so important to you?
I think lots of reasons. One, because I just believe in equity. I do believe that's the way that we will change the world. I think intersectionality has a lot of impact on everything from inequalities in the world right the way through to, the climate crisis. So I think diversity in the workplace, in organisations generally is really important. But I think where we will see true change is making sure it's equitable. That will be the kind of key thing. And some of the research that's just around this is, the UN brought out just last week that only 1% of the world population of women and girls are empowered or live in a country where there's a small gender gap.
1%?
1%.
That's shocking.
It's unbelievable. And you just don't hear enough, in my opinion, about what are we doing about this. You look at female founders, 1.9% are invested in globally. It's getting worse. So last year it was 2%. This year it's 1.9%. And in the last decade, it hasn't changed at all. So that's a compound issue as well. I think there's lots of other issues going on in the world right now. But if we started to look at some things like the gender pay gap, I think is relatively easy one for an organisation or anyone to look at first, because you should know that data, right? That's actual accessible data that you can then very quickly have an impact on. And it's just not being talked about enough.
Yeah. What do you think the answer is?
I think there needs to be some pressure from organisations, groups. I think, where there's a collection of business owners, Entrepreneurs Forum, other membership groups, the Chamber of Commerce, they need to be calling out. And perhaps when people are members, they need to be transparent about the data that they hold.
That's a good idea.
And I think those simple changes will really put a spotlight on it for people to say, okay, well, we know that organisation is really focused on equity. This is what they're doing about their gender pay gap. Yes, they might not have fixed everything, but it's a really good starting point. And most organisations say, well, we don't really know where our data is or what's going on. That you do. You pay someone every month and you can collect the data on that. So that for me feels like an easier, quicker win.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good idea. I mean, maybe, have you spoken to some of the North East organisations about it?
I have.
Yeah. Are they on it?
I think some of them are. Yeah. I think some of them, perhaps there's a little bit of fear of whether organisations, how they'll respond to it. But I think positioned in the right way, this isn't about naming and shaming. No. This is about bringing people to the table to have a really good conversation about what needs to change. And I think to do that, you need transparency. And that for me would be a good way to at least start the conversation.
Yeah, I agree. And have you ever had any negative experiences within the workplace?
Oh gosh, probably quite a few. But I mean, one that sticks out in my mind more on this kind of topic was working in an organisation that I genuinely believed. I thought it was like my dream job, like opportunity to travel the world, have these amazing experiences, be in a leadership role, create change, all these things that I'm really passionate about. And unfortunately, in that kind of experience, I was sexually harassed by someone that I was working with. And I think at the time, I'm not even sure, Charlotte, I used the terminology sexual harassment. I think that I've been so conditioned, as so many of us have, that, things like banter, which I think is a dangerous word because it allows people to get away with things when it's probably not that funny. Being put in a situation where you're uncomfortable, you are scared, and you are that person's in a position of power, that for me, no woman or anyone should ever be put in that situation. And I think it was only after it all happened that I really sat back and reflected that actually sexual harassment in the workplace is a crime. Like, that is not okay.
No.
And I think when I think of it myself, I know so many women who've experienced some form of sexual harassment in the workplace. And that for me is horrendous. And being put in that situation, you start to really question yourself, and that's the bit that's almost scared me more than anything. I was questioning my own behaviour almost more than the other person, because I was almost saying, have I done something to make them think that I would be remotely interested in this kind of advances? Have I done something to suggest that that's okay to speak to me or treat me that way? Have I done something wrong? Like, that was my immediate thought, rather than that behaviour is unacceptable. It shouldn't be allowed, and no one should have to experience it. Never mind question their own behaviour. And I think that's the worry. We've created this environment where you end up blaming yourself that you've maybe done something to deserve it. I just don't even know what I was thinking.
I totally agree. I hear so many stories where it starts off, maybe I'm reading too much into this, or maybe it's me that's kind of being too nice. And then they lead on to a story which clearly is harassment, but they're trying to justify that it's them to blame. It's so wrong.
And I had these text messages that were clearly sexual in nature and harassment and all these different behaviours and experiences that had gone on. And I was still questioning myself, even when the evidence was clearly there. And it made me really think, I'd like to think of myself as quite a confident person. And so it made me also think, well, okay, if I've struggled in this situation to really accept that I haven't actually done anything wrong, what would someone be feeling if they perhaps didn't have that same level of like courage or confidence or whatever it might be? So yeah, it's quite a strange thing. And I think the one thing I keep coming back to about the whole experience, and bearing in mind I was in a country on my own on a project with this person, so I was in a very kind of like exposed, quite vulnerable situation. I kept thinking to myself, like after the fact, that I once said to my friend that I thought this person was quite good looking. And I kept coming back to, so because I've thought that, does that somehow mean that behaviour was like I deserved it in some way? Which is insane when I think about it. But because I once said that to a friend...
You clearly asked for it, right?
Ages ago, I clearly asked for it. That's exactly what kind of went through my head. So, I didn't, clearly I immediately left that organisation and flew home, and I managed to get an upgrade on the flight because I was crying so much at the airport.
Bless you.
And all the stewardess was just absolutely delightful to me. But it knocked my feeling of safety in those situations, because there'd been other behaviours that had kind of come up where, I'd be excluded from meetings where, and this wasn't sexual harassment, this was probably bullying in the workplace, but they would have a lot of meetings like in a pub, or they would, exclude me from things that I should have been involved in because it was leadership decisions about my team. And there was lots of toxic behaviour. But again, when you're in it and you're thinking, no, this was like my dream job. I want to do this. I'm having an impact. It's amazing. I think I too often overlooked some of those behaviours because I really wanted it to work and I really wanted it to be successful. And I think that's when I speak to other women, in particular, I know it must happen to many people, but particularly women I know, I think we've all done that at times in our career. We've thought we have to accept those behaviours to then either be successful or to be able to progress in that role, or that's just life and we have to get on with it. And I think the brilliance now is when you see the younger generations coming into the workforce, that they know that that's not acceptable. And I think the more other women can talk about these things, the more it reminds them of what is right, what is wrong, and actually giving them the kind of the voice to say, actually, this is not okay and you can't treat me this way.
No, absolutely. And you're very brave for sharing your story as well. Did you manage to confront them?
Yeah, I mean, I did at the time. And, that, again, took a lot of courage. And, of course, immediately there's, like, gaslighting that you're imagining it and all of these things. And I was like, okay, but you sent me this text message
the
last
evidence.
night. Like, this is not okay behaviour. And if I've done anything to make you think that you can treat me or speak to me in this way, please know that you can't.
Good for you.
Yeah.
As a young person to speak up for yourself. Well done.
Yeah, but it took... I think it felt brave, but it also just felt like I'd come to the end of my tether. So in a way, what wasn't brave about it, Charlotte, was I should have done that quite a bit a while ago. And so it didn't feel huge courage at the time because I was disappointed in myself that I'd let it get that far.
Oh, but you still did eventually. And
yeah, and I think that's maybe just how we beat ourselves up, don't we, about these mistakes we make and the things that we have to forgive ourselves for. And, that person as well, they were dealing with life with the resources available to them, right? So they, at some point in their life, they've learned that behaviour is okay. And so I think you have to forgive that behaviour, because if we don't forgive it, then that's only going to damage me, right? It doesn't change anything for them. They probably don't even ever think of it, right? It's only stuck with me.
you never know. They might still feel guilty, I'd like to think.
Yeah, maybe. But I think you end up, if you can't forgive that person, then it's only you that you're damaging, in my opinion.
I totally agree.
You have to come to the point of acceptance that, that behaviour is not okay. And then you move on from it, and you also think, okay, I want to build an organization where people do feel safe at work, where they do have that trust, where they don't have that kind of fear or lose what was an amazing opportunity because of that situation.
Yeah, such a shame. But you're so right, and you're so wise. You can't let that hold you back. And if anything, has that motivated you to do what you do now?
I think in some respects, I don't know. I think probably more indirectly than directly. Okay. I think I'd always wanted to have my own business, but it definitely really spurred me on to build an organisation and that not only impacts people outwardly that we work with, to not be in that kind of situation, in some way heal the workplace, but also to make sure that in our own team as well, people feel respected, people feel safe, people have that level of trust, and that they don't have to fear those situations, and or if they do come across that situation, they know that there's the system in place for them to have that situation dealt with appropriately, but also knowing that they will be believed and they will be supported through it.
Wow. Yes, I can imagine that was quite a defining moment for your early kind of career.
Yeah.
Were there any defining moments in your childhood?
I think probably yes, a lot. I mean, some that I don't feel comfortable talking
Fair
to
enough.
yet. I think maybe in the future, if I'm ever allowed back, when I've done some more work on myself, but I'm not quite there yet. But I think one that does stick out for me is my mum really pushed me, and it was a push because I really didn't want to go to speech and drama, to really embrace speech and drama as like a skill and as a hobby, but also it didn't feel like a hobby, Charlotte, at the time. It was like lots of practice and things. But she was really keen for me to build confidence when I was younger. I think she'd had a really not great experience in education and in school. And so for her, the big thing she wanted to do for me is to give me perhaps those opportunities she hadn't had. So the speech and drama bit was a big one for her. So, being on stage, practicing. I remember my teacher then got me involved in competitions and all of this stuff. And you can imagine growing up in Middlesbrough in the 90s, there was a lot of 80s and 90s. People are probably trying to guess my age now. But I got a lot of grief for the speech and drama stuff, a lot of, it wasn't quite full-scale horrendous bullying, but I was definitely picked on for it. But it did grow an incredible amount of confidence and I think courage to stand up, have an opinion, and to actually, get involved in these kind of situations that I just never would have been exposed to before. And now public speaking is probably my favourite part of my day job. So it really has stuck with me, those skills. And I think that was quite a changing moment for me because it really helped me to understand that, if you have a voice, use it, and also really think about how you can use it in a positive way as well.
Yeah, you're so right. And you're so confident and eloquent and articulate.
Oh, thank you. I love that.
But it really does stand out as soon as you meet you. And I think we mentioned it, theatre studies and drama at school. And at the time, people were like, what silly subjects to learn.
Yeah.
But actually, a lot of life, or certainly a lot of business, is a performance. And so, not that I can remember all the theories that we learned, but a part of that is that confidence.
Yeah.
And if we talked about that deprivation of aspiration, there's definitely a deprivation of confidence.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah.
And maybe people would argue, can confidence be taught? But
so I actually did a LinkedIn Live on a similar subject only last week, and I believe that confidence is built over time. The bit we actually need at the start, and both can be developed, is courage. Because it's the courage that actually allows you to step forward into the unknown, not knowing all the variables, having that fear of success or failure. And it's that courage that I think then allows you to build confidence over time. I do believe both are muscles and, abilities that we can develop over our whole lifetime. But I think it's through practice and it's through being in environments where you do feel safe enough to do that practice as well. So public speaking for me was definitely the game changer because then I used it kind of when I went to university or even later in school, like debate teams, all of that kind of stuff I loved doing, really, really enjoyed it. And as I say, it's like the big part of my role now in the business is getting up on stage and talking. So, yeah.
And then it makes you wonder, why isn't it inbuilt into all the national curriculum?
Gosh.
Because we
Charlotte,
all speak.
Totally agree. I know. I mean, I do think it's, just learning like vocabulary and, pace and all of these things. It does help you, not just if you want to be on stage in a, speaking event, but, in any line of work, you need to be able to communicate with people effectively. You need to be able to build relationships, all of that stuff. And it does come down to how you do that through speech, typically. I think it's really important. And if it was in the school curriculum, I think it would be amazing, like so impactful. But it's often those kind of human skills that are not prioritized. And I think that's where there's work to be done, isn't there? And I mean, gosh, it's a whole other podcast episode talking about the education system.
I know, and we're short on time as it is. So let's save that for when you come back and you're ready to unload more of your emotional backpack then as well.
Amazing, yeah.
Brilliant. So we'll move on to our regular 10 questions.
Oh, yes. I think this is the bit I'm dreading out of the whole thing.
Well, it's just a bit of fun, really.
I know, I love it.
How you perceive yourself on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best at these 10 traits.
Okay.
So number 1, how good looking are you?
I would go 7. I think I'm reasonably good looking. I like to think so anyway.
Well, it's all about what you think. How funny are you?
Oh, so I struggle with this one because I at one point really enjoyed, I quite want to go through the training you can do to be a stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
I think it would be really fun to learn the process and the storytelling. So I like to think I'm quite funny, but I think it could be improved upon. So I'd go for a 6 there.
Awesome. I'm glad you said that. I'm always curious about that because I think if you could stand up on stage and make everyone laugh, you're sorted for life.
Oh, I think it's an amazing skill. And people who do that, they're so clever in how they do it, how they build a story. Yeah. And, I think it's amazing.
Yeah, amazing skills. That's taking it one step further.
Yeah. the we'll have to go together.
Yeah, I'm up for that. Cooking. How good at cooking are you?
Terrible. Absolutely terrible at cooking. So I'd probably go, I cook to survive rather than to, thrill or impress people. So I think it's probably going to have to be a 3.
Brilliant. How good at singing are you?
Absolutely dreadful as well. I like to think that I love singing. Oh, I can't speak. I love seeing people sing, and I think it's an amazing skill. But unfortunately, it's not one I was blessed with. So it's definitely best I just stick to being in the car. I'd go for a 1 there.
Oh right,
yeah,
quite
it's
low.
That bad, Charlotte. Yeah, it's that bad. Can't even be in a choir bad.
Okay.
Yeah.
How good at, we've talked about alcohol and drinking. When you did drink, did you have a good tolerance?
I was excellent at drinking, yeah. And I think this is probably my downfall, Charlotte. And I think I've probably drank enough that I probably don't need to for the rest of my life, really. Okay. So I actually think this is really bad, right? I used to be almost praised by friends at my tolerance for drinking. How fucked up is that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I would probably say probably a 9.
Wow.
Yeah,
see, I was praised for the opposite reason. My tolerance was so bad. I'd be the one passed out in the corner of the room. They just put me somewhere safe, with all the bags, and they would find that hilarious. So maybe I kind of acted up to that a little bit, but not good, not funny.
I know.
It's not cool.
I know. And it's crazy that we've been taught that that's a thing to be praised for.
That is fun, to drink until you pass out and then laugh about it the next day.
I know.
Yeah, very strange people
scary,
we are.
Scary.
Parenting. Now, you might not have any children, but if not any pets, fur babies?
I do. So I am the dog mum, so I have a Great Dane, and I also have goats. So I'm a goat herder by night and day, I suppose. But
I love that.
So, I'm quite a good animal parent, I think. I'm probably more the sort that would, what would I say out of 10? I'd go for a good 8 there.
Okay.
Good 8, yeah.
Yeah, how many goats?
4.
Wow, that's so cute. And do you have a little field and everything to keep them in?
Yes, so they are at the back of our house, yeah.
Oh, that's lovely.
They are very gorgeous.
Love a pet goat.
I know, I'll send you some photos.
Yes,
They're
please
good
do.
fun.
How good a friend are you?
I'm a really good friend. And when I read this, I was like, actually, I'm going to go high on this. I'm going to go on a 10 on this.
Brilliant.
Because it's something that I think, because I've so keen on good life for me is relationships, I think I've really invested in not loads of friends, a small number, but really great friends.
Yeah. Oh, that's really important. How kind are you?
I think I'm kind, but I don't know if other people would say the same. So me judging myself, I'd say, 9.
Brilliant. Brilliant.
I'm kind.
And sex? How good at sex are you?
Pretty good. I've never had any complaints, which I think is always like a good sign. But I mean, do people give much feedback on that kind of thing? I mean, I was trying to think about this, but I'd like to think I'm quite good.
I thought about this. So obviously, a lot asking the question. I feel like it's cruel if you don't give feedback, particularly if the performance isn't great. As long as it's delivered in a kind way.
Yeah, and also as long as it's developmental, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. But yeah, you know, when you kind of, I've been very blessed with my partners, but say you've got someone I've heard stories from friends, and say you've got someone who's just not very good, and you're kind of at the age I'm at, nearing 40. You know, whose fault is that? Is that the person that should have given the feedback early on?
Maybe at day one.
Yes, unless they ignored it, of course. But yeah, you know, you're meant to help each other in life. I see that as helping future partners.
I agree. I'm going to be bold here. I'm going to go a 9.
Good. I like that.
Yeah.
Fantastic. On that note, we will end.
Hi, it's Ryan from Harvey and Hugo, and I am the videographer here. So, are you looking for a new way to stand out in today's crowded digital landscape? Well, look no further than podcasting. Here at Harvey and Hugo, we specialise in creating and producing high quality podcasts that engage and inspire audiences. And with our comprehensive production services, we'll take care of all the technical details, from the recording and the editing to the distribution and the promotion. With millions of listeners tuning in every day, it's the perfect time to start connecting with them on a deeper level. Let Harvey and Hugo help you unlock the power of podcasting and take your message to the next level.